doing chapter number 1, that is basic fundamentals of wine, in which we'll be studying about the definition of wine and the classification of wine today. So as I mentioned to you that wine is being produced from grape juice, and the definition itself signifies the same thing, saying that wine is an alcoholic beverage obtained from the fermentation of juice of freshly gathered grapes. So wine has been made from grape juice, and basically the process by which the alcohol is formed is due to the fermentation process. So basically, if you see in alcoholic beverages, there are two ways in which the alcohol is being made. One is the fermentation process and the other is the distillation process. So initially in your syllabus we are going to look into the fermentation process, because wine is being made by fermentation process. Okay, so I'll just give you a brief about, wine is generally produced in countries wherein the weather conditions are more favorable for the growth of the wine, of the grapes. So if you see, wine is majorly produced in France, Italy. If you can say, you can almost like more than 50% of wine that has been produced in the whole world is produced from these countries. And nowadays other countries like Germany, America, or you can say Spain, even India nowadays are producing wine. So what they have done is they have you cannot change the weather conditions in these countries, but what you can do is you can take that particular the plant from there where the wine, as in now you all should not get confused between when I'm speaking about wine. There are these two terms which the pronunciation is the same but the spelling is different. Even the plant, as in the grape plant, is called as vine, that is wine, and what is being produced from the grapes is called wine. Okay, so that confusion should not be there. So as I mentioned to you that wine is the alcoholic beverage obtained from the fermentation of the juice of freshly gathered grapes. The fermentation takes place in the district of origin according to the local tradition and practice. So there are certain, you will get to know further when we get into the chapters, like when we are studying about wines from France, wines from Italy, wines from Spain. So there are certain laws, certain rules that you need to follow when you are producing the wine. Only a relatively small area of the world is wine producing. As I mentioned to you that in the entire world there are very few countries that produce wine because of the weather conditions that are favorable to the growth of wine. This is because the grape will only provide juice of the quality necessary for conversion into a drinkable wine where two climatic conditions prevail. So there are two climatic conditions. What is the two conditions that are there? First is sufficient sun to ripen the grape. So this is one of the most important thing in the weather conditions, that there should be sufficient sun to ripen the grape. And the second point is that winters should be moderate yet sufficiently cool to give the wine, that is the plant, a chance to rest and restore its strength for the growing and fruiting season. So these are the two weather conditions, that there should be adequate sunlight, as well as during the winters it should be cool enough for the growth of the wine. So these two conditions are very rare in few of the countries. So that's the reason France and Italy are able to produce almost more than 50% of wine in the world. If you see, I'll just read out the current scenario, like around 25 million or even more, you can say 25 million areas of land have been dedicated for the cultivation of vineyards. They produce an annual crop of more than 40,000 million bottles of wine, okay, in France and Italy. These are the two major wine producing countries. Nowadays other countries like Portugal, Germany, USA, Argentina and India also produce a considerable amount of wine. There are a lot of countries who produce wine, like other countries are from Africa. Okay, even they do produce wines, and but you will not get the the taste or the best type of wine which you will get in France or Italy. Even though these countries are producing, still you will not get a wine, because here things are being kind of created artificially. Over there everything is there naturally. Like for example, the soil. Okay, you all are aware that soil also plays a very important role in this. So apart from the weather conditions, the soil is another thing. So even though these other countries are producing wines, the quality of the wine is not that great as what is being produced in France and Italy. Now we go ahead with the classification of wine. So as I mentioned that wines are classified on the basis of color, taste, characteristics and addition of substances. Now when I say color, you can clearly see in the picture I have shown three type of wines over there. One is red, one is pink and the other is white. Okay, so basically you can classify the wines like red, white or pink. Okay, the taste is a very important aspect over here, because each of the wines have a peculiar taste by which even if your eyes are closed you can understand which wine you are having. Like for example, if you are having a red wine has a completely different taste. If you say in F&B terms, we say that it is generally being a little bit more full-bodied wine, wherein when you have, I don't know how many of you all must have had red wine, but when you generally have red wine, you feel that dryness on your palate of your tongue. You feel a little bit dry. That does not happen when you're having white wine. So depending on taste also, the wines can be classified. Then there are various characteristics related to, like depending on how many years the wine has been produced, has been stored, or generally they are having various characteristics. And the other point is addition of substances, wherein sometimes a wine is being flavored or some kind of aroma is being given to that. So that's the reason I have mentioned that also in the classification. Now we'll move to the next slide, which we will get into the depth. You will get a better idea of what I'm trying to say. So if you see in the classification that I've mentioned over here, on top right below the classification of wines, there are four things that I have mentioned. First thing is still wines, then we have sparkling wines, then I have written as quality and addition. Okay, so still wines are basically, they are named as they are called as the table wines, and they are classified further as red, white and pink. The rosé wine means it's called as pink wines. Okay, so we'll be seeing into depth what these wines, what is the description about these wines, what are they known for, or what is the characteristics of these wines. Then you have over there next to still wines, you can see sparkling wines. Sparkling wines are those wines which consist of CO2. CO2 is carbon dioxide. So the normal wines which we are talking about, the still wines, these wines will not have CO2 in them. Okay, because just for your explanation, when the alcohol is getting formed, when the fermentation takes place, that time the CO2 is allowed to release. But in case of sparkling wines, artificially or even naturally, the CO2 is not allowed to be. So the best example of sparkling wines is your champagne. I'm not quite sure whether you all have seen champagne or not, but just an example, if everyone has to connect to champagne, generally for occasions or any particular celebration, they generally pop up a champagne. So that's what is a sparkling wine. Champagne is a sparkling wine. Then you can see further, that is quality. Under quality there is a classification which is of vintage and non-vintage wines, which I will explain it to you all later. And further on I have mentioned as addition, under which I have classified it as natural and fortified. So I explained to you what is addition of substances, wherein you flavor the wine with some particular herbs or spices, or you give a particular aroma to it. So this is how is a broad classification of the wines. Now we'll go one by one and we'll see exactly what these wines are.